I took the fire lookout job the summer I turned 34. That was the summer after my father died, and the summer before I understood that I was not going to be a man who stayed anywhere for long. The Forest Service kept a tower on Sorrel Knob, up in the north end of Halloway County, and every year they needed somebody to sit in it from the first week of June until the rains came back in September. The pay was poor. The work was to watch for smoke. I drove up from Ash Grove on a Tuesday morning in a truck that was older than I was. You go out past the feed store, past the turn for the reservoir, and then the pavement gives up, and it is gravel for 9 miles. The road climbs the whole way. There are places where the trees close over the top of it so completely that you have to run your headlights at 10 in the morning. And there are places where the ridge falls away on your right, and you can see the whole green shoulder of the county laid out below, hazy, folded over on itself like cloth. The tower was a steel frame, 60 feet, with a glass cab at the top and a catwalk running all the way around. Somebody had painted it a long time ago, and the paint had given up in patches, so it stood there, the color of an old nickel. There were 84 steps. I counted them that first day, and I counted them most days after. Inside, the cab was maybe 14 feet square, a cot, a propane ring, a cabinet with a coffee pot, and a stack of tin things left by whoever had it the year before. A radio on a shelf, and in the middle of the floor, mounted on a wooden pedestal, the fire finder. A brass ring with a map of the district set into it, siding wires strung across, so you could take a bearing on a column of smoke and read the compass angle off the rim. I set my bag on the cot, and I stood there with my hands on the rail of the fire finder, and I looked out. You could see 100 miles on a clear day. You could see weather coming from an hour away, and you could see, in every direction, that there was nobody at all. I remember thinking that was exactly what I had come for. I want to be careful about that because of what came later. I want to be clear that at the beginning, I was glad to be alone up there. It was the first thing in a long time that had felt like relief. You learn the rhythm of a lookout fast because there is not much of it. You get up when the light does. You make coffee. You walk the catwalk once, all the way around, and you look at everything in order. North first, then east, then south, then west, so that you never skip a quarter without noticing you skipped it. You take a weather reading at 9. You take another at 2. And in between you sit, and you watch, and you learn the shape of your own district well enough that a change in it will catch your eye before your mind has caught up. That is really the whole trick of the job. You are not looking for smoke. You are learning what the country looks like when nothing is wrong, so thoroughly that wrong announces itself. At 7 each evening the radio net came up. There were 3 towers working the North District that year. Sorrel Knob, which was me, Pell's Gap, which was a woman named Ruth Corbin, who had been doing it for 11 seasons, and Kettle Ridge, which was a young fellow whose name I have honestly lost, and who quit in July and was not replaced. The net was supposed to be a weather check and a status call. It took 90 seconds if you did it properly. Nobody did it properly. Ruth would come on and give her readings, and then she would ask what I had eaten, and I would tell her, and she would tell me it was not enough. The boy on Kettle Ridge would complain about his generator. Somewhere in the middle of the second week I realized I had started looking forward to 7 o'clock, the way you look forward to a meal. I want you to understand the quality of the quiet up there, because it is not the quiet of a house with nobody in it. It is not empty. There is wind in the pines all day and all night, and the wind has different voices depending on which way it comes across the knob. There are cicadas that start in the middle of the afternoon and stop all at once, together like someone lifted a needle off a record. There is a creek somewhere below that you cannot see and can always hear, so it was full of sound. It just was not full of people. And after about 10 days, my ear had gotten so used to the sound of nothing being wrong that I could sleep straight through a thunderstorm and come wide awake if a stone turned over on the road below. The first time I saw it was the 19th of June. I know the date because I wrote it down, and because writing it down is the reason I am able to tell you any of this at all. It was a little after 11 at night. I had gone out on the catwalk because it was too warm in the cab to sleep, and I was standing on the north side with my back against the rail, not really looking at anything. There was a light on Kettle Ridge, not on the tower. The tower was 2 miles further along, and I knew exactly where it sat, and this was not it. This was down on the flank of the ridge, maybe 2/3 of the way up, in the timber. It was low, and it was steady, and it was the yellow of a lantern rather than the white of a flashlight. And it was moving. It moved from left to right at about the pace of a man walking. Not hurrying, not stopping. It went behind trees and came out the other side of them. It went on like that for a good while, and then it did not come out from behind something, and that was the end of it. Now, there is nothing strange about a light in the woods. People go into the woods at night for a dozen ordinary reasons, and most of them are legal. That is what I told myself while I was standing there, and I believed it. But there was no road on that face. I want to be plain about this because it is the whole point. I had the district map on the fire finder, and I had been staring at it for 3 weeks. There was no road, no trail, no logging grade, nothing on the north flank of Kettle Ridge below the tower spur. To be where that light was, walking the way it was walking, a man would have had to come up through 2 miles of laurel hell in the dark. And laurel hell is not a thing you walk through. It is a thing you fight through, on your hands and knees, in daylight, badly. I went back inside and I opened the log and I wrote, the 19th of June, 23:10 hours, light observed north flank Kettle Ridge, moving east, no known access. And then I sat there with the pen in my hand for a while, and then I closed the book and went to bed. I did not report it on the net. I want to be honest about that too. I had been up there 19 days, and I did not want to be the new man who called in a lantern. 8 days later, a man named Elgin Frye signed the trailhead register at Pell's Gap. I did not meet him. I want to be careful here, because over the years I have heard the story told back to me, with me in it, standing at the trailhead shaking his hand, and that never happened. All I ever had of Elgin Frye was 3 lines of handwriting in a weatherproof box at the bottom of a mountain, and I did not even see those until later. What he wrote was his name, the date, the number in his party, which was 1, and where he intended to go, which was the ridge trail north to the old Vardy mill site and back out the same way. 2 nights. He wrote that he was from Kingsport. He wrote, in the box for comments, that the gate at the bottom was open and somebody ought to know. That was all. He was 51 years old. He had done that trail before, more than once, which came out afterward. He had told a neighbor when he expected to be home. He carried a proper pack, and he had a whistle on the strap of it, and he had, according to his sister, a habit of writing in a small notebook every evening, no matter where he was. These are the things I learned about him later, in the way you learn about a person when a lot of men are standing around a table trying to guess where he went. At the time, none of it reached me. I was 60 feet up a steel tower 9 miles from the nearest telephone, watching the sky go through its colors, and a man I would never see walked past the bottom of my mountain and kept going north. I have thought about that a great deal since. Not in a haunted way. I do not want to give you the wrong idea about the shape of this. It is more that I have never gotten used to how ordinary the beginning of it was. There was no feeling. There was no cold hand on the back of my neck. There was just a Wednesday, and it was warm, and I made too much coffee and drank all of it anyway. And somewhere below me A man wrote his name in a box on a post and went up the trail with the whole rest of his life still folded up in his pack. On the 2nd of July, I saw the light again, and this time it was closer. Same hour, near enough, same color. But it was not on Kettle Ridge. It was on my own slope, below the tower, down where the grade steepens and the timber goes from pine to hardwood. Maybe half a mile, close enough that I could see it swing a little as it moved, the way a lantern swings when it is carried in a hand and not set on the ground. It came along the contour, east to west this time, at that same unhurried walking pace, and about halfway across it stopped. It stopped for what I would guess was 2 minutes. It did not go out. It did not move. And I stood on the catwalk in my undershirt, with both hands on the rail, and I found that I had stopped breathing properly, and that I could not have said why, because a lantern standing still in the woods is the least frightening thing in the world. Then it went on west, and then it was gone. That evening I brought it up on the net. I did it badly. I said something like, "Has anybody been seeing lights down low at night?" And there was a pause on the channel that went on about 1 second longer than it should have. Then Ruth came back and said, "On the slope, moving slow, like a lantern." I said yes. She said, "I've seen it every year I've been up here. 11 years. I asked her what it was. She said she did not know and that she had stopped trying to find out around year 4. I asked her if she logged it, and she said, "And I remember this exactly," she said. "I log it. I always log it. You write down what you see and the time you saw it, and then you leave it alone. That's the whole job." I said that was not much of an answer. She said no, it wasn't. And then she gave me her 9 o'clock weather like nothing had happened. And the boy on Kettle Ridge came on and complained about his generator, and the net closed at 7:04. And I sat in the dark cab for a long time afterward, with the radio hissing. Elgin Frye was due out on the Friday. On Sunday afternoon, the county called the Forest Service, and the Forest Service called the towers. I want to describe how that arrives. When you are alone, the radio comes up outside of net hours, which it almost never does, and there is a different quality in the voice, and you understand before the words get to you that the shape of your week has just changed. They gave me his name and his description, and the trail he had written down. They asked me to take a hard look at the north end of my district for anything. Smoke, movement, a tarp, a color that did not belong. They said a ground team would be at the Pell's Gap trailhead by 6, so I looked. I had a pair of surplus binoculars, and I put my elbows on the rail, and I went over that country a square at a time, from 4 in the afternoon until the light was gone. I did it again the next morning, starting before sunrise. I did it for 6 days. It is very strange to look for a man in a forest from 60 feet up. You are close enough to see a hawk turn over and choose a different thermal. You can watch a storm build over 3 counties, and you cannot see a human being standing in the open a mile away, unless he is wearing something red and the sun is on him. The canopy is the thing. In July, that country is under a lid. From above, it is one continuous green surface, moving a little, breathing, and everything that matters is underneath it. I could see the roof of the world and none of the rooms. On the 2nd day, they brought dogs. On the 3rd day, a helicopter worked the drainages for 4 hours, and I sat and listened to it beating around down in the folds. And every time it came near the tower, the sound arrived a half-second before the machine did. On the 5th day, it rained hard for 9 hours. And I knew, and everybody knew, what that meant for the dogs. Nobody said much on the net that week. Ruth gave her readings and I gave mine. The boy on Kettle Ridge had already quit by then. So it was the 2 of us, and a lot of open channel. They found his camp on the 8th day, about 1.5 miles short of the mill site, in a flat spot beside the creek that people had obviously used before. The tent was up, and it was staked properly. His pack was inside it, closed. His boots were not there, which meant he had them on. There was a pot on a rock with water still in it, and the water had gone green. There was no sign of an animal, and there was no sign of anybody else, and there was no sign of a struggle. And the men who told me about it used all three of those phrases in a row like they were reading off a list. His notebook was in the pack. He had written in it every evening, exactly the way his sister said he would. The last entry was the Thursday. I have never seen that notebook. What I was told, by a deputy named Hobbs, who I trusted, was that the last entry was ordinary for most of its length. Weather, mileage. A remark about his knee, and then, at the bottom, in the same hand, a note that somebody was walking on the far side of the creek with a light, and that he had called out twice and got no answer. That is all. No alarm in it. Hobbs said it read like a man noting down something mildly curious before he went to sleep. They searched for 19 days. They ran the creek down 4 miles. They put men on the old grade and on both ridge trails, and they walked the mill site foot by foot. In August, a team went back in and did the drainages again with fresh people. They never found him. They never found anything of him. Not a boot, not a strap, not a scrap of cloth on a briar. In that country, over that many years, that is not common. Things come back out eventually. Water moves them, or a hunter finds them, or the leaves come off in November, and there they are. 19 years later, a man walking a bear trail 2 ridges east found a hiking boot in the leaf litter, and it went to the lab, and it was not his. In the middle of August, on a wet day when there was nothing to see, I cleaned out the cabinet under the coffee pot. There were 4 logbooks in the back of it, behind the tins. They were the standard Forest Service kind, black cloth boards. The pages ruled for date, time, and observation. They went back to 1963. I read all 4 of them over about a week. I want to be clear that this was not detective work. I was a bored man in a small room in the rain. Most of it is exactly what you would expect. Weather, smoke reports, and the bearings taken on them. A note in 1971 about a bear that got into the propane locker. Somebody in 1968 who drew, very carefully, in pen, the outline of the ridgeline as seen from the north window, with every knob labeled, and scattered all the way through, in 6 or 7 different hands, across 18 years, the light. They did not all call it the same thing. One man wrote lantern seen low, yin flank, moving E. Another wrote the same phenomenon as previous seasons. A woman in 1974 wrote light on the grade again, 2340, 3 nights running. That was the first time I saw the word grade, and it did not mean anything to me yet. Nobody speculated. Not one of them, in 18 years, wrote down what they thought it was. They wrote the date and the time and the direction of travel. And then they went on to the barometer. That was what got to me, more than the sightings did. 6 or 7 people, sitting alone in this same 14 feet of glass, seeing this same thing, and every one of them arriving at the same decision, without ever meeting each other. Write it down, and do not write down what you think. I understood then that Ruth had not been giving me a personal philosophy on the radio that night. She had been passing along a house rule. I found the grade on the district map, which I had been looking at every single day for 2 months without once seeing it. It was not marked as a trail. It was a thin dotted line, unlabeled, that came up out of the drainage on the north side, ran along the contour below the tower, crossed the flank of Kettle Ridge, and stopped. The map was a reprint of a survey from 1949. On the newer sheet the county sent up in July, the line was not there at all. It was a logging grade. They cut that country hard in the 20s, and they built narrow rail beds along the contours to bring the timber out. And when they were done, they walked away, and the mountain took it back in about 15 years. There are hundreds of miles of them in this part of the state, and most of them are invisible now, unless you are standing on one. And even then, you might just think the ground is unusually flat for a moment. I sat with the two maps side by side on the floor of the cab for a long time. Then I did the thing I had been avoiding, which was to take the bearings out of the logbooks, all of them, 18 years of them, and plot them. They fell on the line. Every one, not near it, on it, from 1963 to 1981. In 7 different hands, the light moved along the old grade, east some nights and west other nights, at the pace of a man walking, and it stopped where the grade stopped. I remember I stood up and walked out onto the catwalk, and the sun was going down behind Sorrel Knob, and the whole east side of the county was already in shadow. And I looked at that dark slope below me, and I thought, somebody is still walking home from work. I want to be careful. I do not offer that as a theory. I am telling you the thought I had, standing on a steel catwalk on a Tuesday evening in August of 1981, because it arrived whole, and I have never entirely gotten rid of it. On the 26th of August, I went down to the grade in daylight. I want to say plainly that I did not go at night, and that I did not go looking for the light, and that I was not brave. I went in the morning with a canteen and a compass because I had spent a week plotting bearings on a map, and I wanted to stand on the actual ground and find out whether the line was real. It took me 2 hours to get down there, and about 40 minutes of casting back and forth along the slope to find it. And then I was on it, and it was unmistakable. A shelf about 8 feet wide, cut into the hillside, running level as a hallway through country that goes up and down everywhere else. Trees growing out of it now, big ones, 80 years of them. But underneath, the shape was still there. Your feet know before your eyes do. I walked it east for maybe a mile. It was pleasant. That is a strange thing to report, but it is true. It was the easiest walking I had done all summer, and there were ferns, and the light came down green through the canopy. And I remember thinking that I understood why a person would take this route. I found a rail spike, brown as a stick, half swallowed by a beech root. I found a section of cable and a piece of a stove, and about 1.25 miles east, where the map showed the line ending, I found a wooden marker post, square cut, weathered silver, standing up out of the leaves at an angle. It had no writing on it that I could read. Something had been burned or stamped into it once, and the grain had eaten it. I stood there, and I looked at that post for a while, and then I turned around and walked back to the tower, and I did not go down there again. I have been asked, more than once, why I stopped. People want there to have been a reason. They want me to say I heard something, or that the birds went quiet, or that I felt watched. None of that happened. It was a nice morning, and I was standing on a flat place in the woods next to an old post. I simply arrived at the end of what I wanted to know. The file on Elgin Frye stayed open for a long time, and then it stopped being open in any way that mattered. The official finding was that he had left his camp for an ordinary reason at night and become disoriented, and that the terrain had done the rest. That is not an unreasonable finding. That country will do exactly that to a person, and it does it several times a decade, and most of the time the searchers find the answer within a week, and it is very sad and very simple. I have never argued with the file. I want to be clear about that. I do not have anything to put in its place. A man who is careful enough to stake a tent properly is also a man who might step out to look at a light on the far side of a creek and step down the bank and put a foot wrong on wet stone. And that is all it takes. It takes nothing at all. What I have is a coincidence of geography, and I know exactly how thin that is. I gave my logbook to the district office at the end of the season the way you are supposed to. I did not attach a note. I did not plot my bearings for anyone. I thought about it for most of a week, and then I did not do it. And I have gone back and forth for 40 years on whether that was cowardice or good sense. Ruth Corbin worked Pell's Gap for 6 more seasons after that one. I saw her twice, both times at the district picnic, and both times we talked about other things. She died in 2009. Her obituary said she had been a school teacher, which I had not known, and that she loved the mountains, which I had. The last thing she ever said to me on the subject was on the radio in July of 1981, and I have already told you what it was. Write down what you see, and the time you saw it, and then leave it alone. I did not understand it as kindness at the time. I do now. I did not go back to Sorrel Knob the next summer. I took a job with the county road department, and I stayed with it 26 years, and I got married in 1984, and none of the rest of my life has very much to do with this story. The tower is still standing. They stopped staffing the lookouts in this district in 1993 when the aircraft patrols got cheap enough, and for a while the towers just sat there and rusted. Then some people in Ashgrove got organized about it, and now there are 3 of them on a historic register, and Sorrel Knob is one. You can hike up to it. The cab is locked, but you can stand on the lower landing, and there is a plaque, and the view has not changed at all. I have gone up twice, once with my wife in 1996, and once by myself about 4 years ago, slowly, with a stick. The second time I sat on the landing for most of an afternoon and watched the weather come across from the west the way I used to, and I found that I still had it. The eye. You never lose it. I could see where the timber had come back in on the Kettle Ridge burn from 2004, and I could see 3 places where the canopy was a different green because the ground under it was wet, and I could see a hawk turn over and choose a different thermal, and I could see, running along the north flank below me, in the way the trees were spaced, and in a certain flatness that you would not notice unless you already knew, the line of the grade. I have never seen the light since 1981. I want to be honest with you about that, because it would be an easy thing to say that I have. But every so often somebody with a camera and a permit spends a night up on that landing, and every so often one of them puts something on the internet about a lantern low in the timber, moving east, at the pace of a man walking, and people argue about it for a week, and then they stop. And I read those when I come across them. And I do not comment. I write down the date,